David, this is Evolutionary Psychology, the podcast.
Actual evolutionary psychology by actual evolutionary psychologists.
David, today we have a guest, Amy Boddy, who is in the anthropology department at UC Santa Barbara, and she studies microchimerism.
Yes, and I did not really know what chimerism was
Uh,
before going into this, and I learned during the episode all about it and a bunch of other crazy, fascinating things like cancer biology and whether rates of cancers, differ across different animals, whether mammals have more of it than other types of animals, and even contagious face cancer and the Tasmanian devil. We talked about that. Lots of really interesting stuff
yeah,
in
and
this
tons of
episode.
stuff on, I didn't realize about like the placenta and moms and babies and how you might have the cells of your mom and your grandmother in you, like just
Oh yeah.
cool, crazy stuff.
Yeah, and maternal offspring conflict that manifests itself in weird ways with genes expressed from the father's side versus the mother's side. Super interesting stuff.
Yeah, no, this is mind expanding, bending stuff that it's so fun to do these things. Like I'm learning a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, no, me too. This was just as much of a treat for Dave and me as it will be for you.
Yeah.
So I think you will enjoy this one.
Yeah, without further ado, here's Amy Boddy and David and I discussing all things um, cancer and microchimeric. I don't know if that's the right way to end that. I don't know.
Cancerous and microchimerical.
Yeah. Yeah, David and I will work on this, but in the meantime, enjoy the episode.
Yeah, enjoy.
So we can just go right into it.
Okay.
I I labor under the false cartoonish impression that I am an organism and I'm pretty much like all related to like I am just like an individual thing. I have this idea that sort of, when mothers get pregnant, the relatedness between like the placenta and the mom gets kind of confusing. And I have like intro bio, like I know that like snails, like the expression of like which direction the snail's shell will twist is like a function of the mom and not the baby. So like you can have the extended phenotype of like phenotypic
Yes.
expression downstream. And of course, all of and I'll shut up in a second. But like
Yes.
all the sort of like methylation or I can't even what is the term for when yeah, these things that methylation or like the
Epigenetics.
epigenetics.
Yes.
Yeah, people are like, oh,
Yes.
epigenetics like changes the way we think about natural selection. I mean, obviously, if you think about
Yes.
extended phenotypes, they extend across generations. So anyway, this is all
Yes.
long-winded preface to I still have this, I feel like, and I don't know, but I feel like you're going to disabuse me of my cartoonish view that I'm pretty much a uniform thing related to myself, and I'm not made up of I don't even know what. So where do we start with like or there's two questions. One is like, what do you do? Because I also feel like when we talk to like outside people, we're like, we're psychologists. People are like, oh, are you analyzing me? But I think
Yeah.
what you do, I don't even understand exactly what you do. So I think you have a very particular, interesting thing where most people don't even understand what you do. So either can you talk about what you do, or am I completely wrong about how I think about the unity of myself?
Great questions. I don't know. I don't even know if what I know what I do, but I'll try and explain it.
But that's a great answer. Yeah, me neither.
I've been in every department from like the School of Medicine to psychology to anthropology. So yeah, I am bouncing around interdisciplinarily. But I mostly study pregnancy and I study cells that cross between mother and the baby called microchimerism. And I also study cancer biology. And
So, sorry, cross
yes,
between mother and the baby. Could you
yes,
walk me
yes,
through how that
yes,
works?
yes,
So
yes,
so
yes.
I do not actually know
Yay.
anything about microchimerism.
Oh,
I'm very
oh,
excited to
fun.
learn about it.
Yes.
So, what does
Okay.
that mean for a cell to pass between the mother and the offspring?
Yes. So during pregnancy, And Dave, you started with the placenta and the blurred boundaries. So the placenta is actually a fetal organ. It's mostly derived by fetal tissue, and it invades the maternal endometrium,
Okay.
and across species, across mammals, this integration of the tissues is super diverse. It's so cool. It's like the site of evolutionary conflict. So
Mm.
the placenta is one of the most diverse mammalian organs, and it's, of course, these two genetic entities that are fighting for survival of both of each other, but one wants more than the other, and so it's like a super
Who
diverse
wants more and
organ.
who doesn't?
Yeah,
Yes.
we actually haven't
So
talked about parent-offspring conflict. So some of our
yes,
Yeah.
basic
yes,
Evo
yes,
bio we haven't
yes,
covered on the podcast
yes,
yet.
yes.
Yeah.
So, so ideally, in many of these scenarios, you can see it driven. Paternal genes would like more resources, and maternal genes, it's in their best interest to save resources, not to bleed fully, because they want to save resources for offspring in the future, right? So
Classic
you
dad
see this,
behavior, putting it all
Yeah.
on
right?
mom. You know?
And so
Discounting the
you see
future
this.
too. Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, exactly. And so you see this like tug of war, and you can see it playing out at the genome level with genomic imprinting. So genes that are specifically turned on just in the paternal lineage versus genes that are just turned on in the maternal lineage. Um, and so right there at the site of, resource transfer is the placenta. It's transferring resources to the offspring. It's communicating with the mother. It's doing all this. And so across mammals, it's quite diverse in its shape, its size, how it diffuses, how it integrates into tissue. And so humans have one of the most invasive placentas.
Mm.
And so our placentas actually, the specialized fetal cells like invade the tissue so much that it widens the maternal spiral arteries that kind of embed the endometrium and completely remodels it, has direct access, taps the resource. I think the baby, and when we think about invasive placentas, the paternal genes won. Like it got the upper
Mm.
hand in that
Hmm.
scenario, actually, because
Interesting.
um, because then once there's direct access to resources and it's hooked on, when suddenly there could be lack of resources, what the baby does is ramp up maternal blood pressure.
Mm.
And so we see this with pregnancy complications and stuff like that. So when we're thinking about, cooperation conflict, yeah, humans are unique in that, but yeah, our placenta might have evolved to be quite invasive, and that, of course, was adaptive. But the downside to that is it's costly on the maternal body.
Wow.
Wow. Yet another thing women can blame men for.
Yes, exactly.
Is the idea that men won in the sense of still that's like still naturally selected, like in the sense of if there's differential reproductive success out in the world among variants of this like sort of offspring production system, is it that the babies that are extracting more are doing better, and that's sort of the check. I mean, because obviously, like, you can't
Right.
kill the mom, like, right? Like,
Right,
there's
right.
this, yeah,
Well, it's so complicated because if
yeah.
you have, we know birth weight matters, right? Birth weight matters. A bigger baby is going to survive better. It has more fat. It's got more resources, right? We see this all the time that it matters. But on the other extreme, a bigger baby means more potentially obstructed labor and birth
Mm.
complications. So there is this, really stabilizing selection on birth weight. And it's on average like 7 pounds. And I think it's so cool. Like there's
Yeah,
just not a lot of wiggle room that you have.
literally,
And
yeah,
it might be, yeah, pun intended.
yeah.
Um, the yeah, and it might have to, our birth is the timing of birth is just interesting too, because as mammals, comparatively, you are termed like at full term at 37 weeks, but you can go up to 42 weeks. And I think that is mind blowing that like we have basically this 5, 6 week window where like baby could come anytime and we don't know. And we actually, from a biological medical standpoint, don't really know what triggers labor. We know there's like a
Yes, that's
cascade
interesting.
of things, but we
Yeah,
can't predict it.
yeah.
We don't know when it's coming. And it's, I think, yeah, all of this negotiation between the mother and the baby, actually.
Yeah, that's really
Yes.
cool. Yeah, you would expect there's tremendous selection pressures on the determined pregnancy or determined birth, like activate birth program.
Yes.
That's really interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
So
sorry. Go ahead,
if we could
David.
get into
Yes.
the
Yes.
logic of the conflict here, because it's
Yes.
not parent offspring conflict. So that's when, parents are equally related to all their children, but siblings are twice as related to themselves as they are to their siblings and to future siblings, and so that
Yep.
creates conflict where the siblings or the children are going to want more resources or twice as much for themselves as for their siblings, whereas parents are going to want to distribute resources and investments equally. And that's the
Hmm.
fundamental conflict that Robert Trivers talks about. Fascinating idea. But this is not that. This is paternal and maternal conflict. And I want to see if I can walk through the logic of how this works.
Hmm.
Because I confess I don't quite fully understand it. So is it the idea that men have or the males have a greater ability to invest in, say, other reproductive opportunities, and that's why they want more investment from the mom. That if like
Right.
why is it in the
Yeah.
male's interest to for the mom to put
Hmm.
more resources into the offspring than would be otherwise beneficial to her or helpful or healthy for her?
It actually builds on parent-offspring conflict, and I believe David Haig coined the term, it's maternal-fetal conflict at this point.
Ah, okay.
But it is, again, under the same principles that the fetus shares half the maternal genes, but then the other half are paternal genes, or from the
Hmm.
paternal point of view.
Right.
And it's those that are driving the conflict, as in, you know, the paternal genes, the best interest is to invest in that pregnancy and to get that baby the most resources as possible. While the mother's only half, related, obviously important for survival of the baby, um, although she will have more babies, right? And so the idea is that you're going to invest as much as you should, not as much as you can
right.
in this baby.
And but yeah, and
Yes,
just to be clear, like that's really helpful. What is the logic though behind the dad? Like let's, I'm the dad.
right.
Why
Okay.
do I want the baby to invest more for this particular pregnancy? Why do my genes want to extract
Right.
more from the mom than the mom wants to extract? Is it because actuarially I might be mating with somebody else in the future? She might be mating with somebody else in the future. Like,
Yes.
is that the
Yes.
okay?
Yes, that's the idea, but I think it goes back farther than humans.
Mm. Oh,
In
interesting.
terms of looking at genomic imprinting,
Mm.
that
Oh,
arose with the evolution of the placenta. Um, Only placental mammals have imprinting, where again, there's like this allelic expression that really depends. There's about 120 imprinted genes, um, and some are paternally imprinted, and some are maternally imprinted. So that means some are just expressed from the paternal genome, and it matters. They have different physiology. They have different impacts on the development of the baby. And we learn this from there's various diseases where if you delete the maternal allele versus the paternal allele, those are two different phenotypes that arise
right.
in the baby. So it's super interesting when you think about it from that. And so, but that arose really, really early in our evolutionary story in terms of maybe 100 million years ago with the evolution of the placenta.
Wow. And even, I mean, the other thing I'm sure you've thought of this, I'm just saying it out loud,
Yes,
is that there's also just the cold calculation of the mother faces this, well, if I do invest to a certain level, there's the chance that I might die.
yes,
And the the dad just doesn't have that calculation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's also
Mm-hmm.
just this cold calculation of you just snip out even assuming a monogamous species,
Mm-hmm.
there's still
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm.
the trade-off, the cost benefit of, well, if I invest more in the offspring, there's a chance that the mother might die. And if you're the mother,
Mm-hmm.
you land on a different trade-off point than if you're not the mother.
Mm-hmm.
It's simply because, like, yeah, the mom might die, but like my offspring might be better off, and it's not me. So like it's, obviously it's not explicit, but it's just cold
Right.
calculus. So I think even
Mm-hmm.
I would think, at least off the top of my head, it seems like even that, just
Right.
because you're not the body risking death or you're
Right.
not the one investing, there's still a conflict between those
Right.
two, and you don't land on the same threshold. Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, I
Interesting.
think it's more of a historical legacy evolutionarily because
Hmm.
obviously within humans, we if there's tons of data to show if mother dies, baby does not have a good chance of
Oh,
surviving
that's
as
true.
well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think
Oh,
this
interesting. So
is
it
like
might
a
be,
historical legacy
I see.
that we have,
Hmm.
it's
So
why we get sick.
Perhaps from an
It's
I
ancestral
why,
see.
form in which
yes,
maternal mortality
yes,
wouldn't have been such a death sentence for the kid.
Yeah.
Perhaps in an
yes,
Or
ancestral.
more
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes,
more polygamy or something.
yes,
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're
yes.
hyper adaptationists. We're like, it must be designed perfectly. What's why is this? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Where I actually don't see I don't I see us as like a messy bag of conflict that somehow is still
Oh
able to
my goodness.
reproduce.
Yeah.
Like we're just like there's all these internal conflicts and there's adaptive compromises and then it just like
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Ever since my child was born, I just like to just slightly editorialize for a second. Like people often celebrate like soldiers and things, and I'm like, it's violence. Like
Just
if you want to see a hero, go to a maternity ward.
yes,
Like there are
yes.
heroes, real
Yes.
heroes in the world every day. They're in a maternity ward. I mean, it's crazy.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Um
Anyway.
So yeah, that all to say that there's cells that then get transferred between our
Hmm.
like deeply invasive placenta, right? There's fetal cells that get transferred into the mother's body, and there's maternal cells that get transferred into the baby's body. And we used to think this was a spillover effect because we have a deeply invasive placenta. But then it was observed in species that don't necessarily have as a deeply invasive placenta that have that like road, that highway that our placentas have. Um, and also these cells persist decades after the pregnancy and they're doing things. So we think that potentially there is an adaptation there and they're actually um, selected for to help with the pregnancy, but also help with that organism afterwards.
Hmm.
Um, and that actually sometimes that can still lead to conflict. So that
Hmm.
can still lead to problems.
So another way to put it, if I understand right, is that the mechanisms in the mother have a biochemical sample of the at least the genetics, if not other substances of her offspring inside of her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And we think they last a lifetime and they have like biological impacts. And if you think about it again, thinking from like this, I think about it from a maternal fetal conflict perspective. It's the baby's insurance policy that the mom will take care of it after birth, right? It's been like a really costly negotiation for 9 months. And now there's cells inside the mother that could maybe potentially help the mother care for the baby even more. So maybe they're involved in lactation biology, attachment, like all of these things, helping the mother heal after the pregnancy as well, in order to make sure they have the best shot at
Wow.
survival.
So that's really interesting. Is it because the baby is new and has new genetics and has new stuff? Is it sort of like it's like a booster rocket of this is a brand new genotype? This is like, everybody has this model of
Yes,
like babies are
yes,
fresh and it's
Yes.
obviously like there's so much here, like the pathogen coevolution and stuff.
Yes.
So the
Yes.
idea is that baby cells are special, fresh. This is the metaphor, and they're
Yes.
coming in and like hyper helping the mom. Is that? I mean, I realize it's like a, I'm it's a metaphor, but
Yes.
is
That's the
that
idea. So
yeah.
we don't know, right? This is like
Yeah.
um it's a newish field. I don't want to say completely not new because we knew about this forever. It was just really hard to study because they're rare cells that are half identical to the host. So we didn't have a lot of genetic tools in our
Mm,
toolkit to actually study this. Actually, what they used to do is look for the Y chromosome. So it was
mm,
women who had given birth to a son, and they just like draw their blood and look for Y chromosome and say, oh, these cells are still here. But
right.
then they started doing it for a bunch of women that had never given birth to a son and still found Y chromosome in their blood.
Mm,
Hmm.
And then it was like, where are those coming from? And so then they had a bunch of just female lab techs do it because they thought it was contamination and still found the same. And what we've realized since then is these cells come over quite early in pregnancy before you even know you're pregnant.
Hmm.
And so you could have had a really early spontaneous miscarriage, never knew about it, and had cells
mm.
seeded into your body.
Wow.
Oh
Um,
wow. Wow.
we also learned that obviously you can have that effect if it's twinning in utero, and then the
Mm,
twin
right.
doesn't.
Right.
But there's this really nice study looking at um, these gir Danish girls and showing that it was before they went through menarche, so before they had an opportunity or chance to be pregnant, and they still found Y chromosome in their blood. And what they've found suggested was maybe it was from their older brothers.
Mm.
So our cells are going into our mother,
Oh wow.
right?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so the older sibs could actually be seeded with,
Wow.
yes.
Wow.
So there's the family tree gets very
Yeah. Yeah.
very big,
Yeah.
very big after that. So
Yeah. And have we gotten to microchimerism yet, or are we still walking to that? Because I don't know
yes,
exactly what
sorry.
the definition. No, no, don't apologize. I'm
Yeah.
just, yeah, I'm curious, like
Yes,
what,
Is
yeah.
that are those Y chromosomes in the female's body? Is that an example of microchimerism?
it is.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. We're still working on the definition of it because some people would argue just because you can detect a gene doesn't mean it's a cell. It could just, again,
Oh,
be
I
a
see.
byproduct of a cell. Where is
I
it
see.
coming from?
Hmm.
Is microchimerism, does it have to be an attack cell? Does it have to persist? Does
Oh,
it
I
have to
see.
do things where
I
we're
see.
actually struggling, not struggling, but debating as a community what the actual definition is. But yeah, what we're getting to is microchimerism is a small amount, small micro of chimeric that's different genome within you.
Hmm.
And we are all microchimeric because we're
Wow.
all mammals.
In the
Yes.
genes, I mean, I mean, we talked about how Jurassic Park is one of our favorite movies.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
Obviously, everybody knows that like genes code for proteins and that builds the animals or
Yes.
organisms, dinosaurs,
Yes.
for example.
Yes.
But why is that significant that the genes are there? Like, because you could just imagine, well, yeah, the genes are there. Like the null
Yes.
hypothesis is sort of like,
Yes.
well, yeah, there's like leakage of cells. Who cares?
Right.
Right? Like,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So, yes, uh, I think it's really, yeah, it's important for a few different reasons. One, the genes are there and the immune system is not getting rid of them. Why?
Oh, right. Oh, because yeah,
We've
because of
learned
course,
self,
yeah, yeah,
non-self. You
yeah.
like that's immunology 101. Anything that's why we can't have these large-scale organ transplants that from anyone, right?
Mm,
Even if it's from a sibling, you still have issues, right? You have to have immunosuppression. So why is the immune system fine with
mm.
this? And then the other thing is we're realizing sometimes the immune system is not fine with this.
Ah,
So women excuse me, are at a higher risk of developing autoimmune diseases.
Hmm.
And some of the idea is that it could be these paternal genes expressed through these baby cells that are triggering an immune response.
Mm.
Wow. That's fascinating. I mean, so
Yes.
that would predict a higher prevalence of autoimmune diseases among women who have microchimerism, so have, say, Y
Yes.
chromosomes that can be detected.
Yes.
Is that, I mean, has that prediction been tested?
It's been looked at often, and
Hmm.
so I can say autoimmune diseases are complex and there's many pathways to them, right? And so you could just have a genetic predisposition. We know
Yeah.
individuals that develop autoimmune diseases in their early ages before pregnancy. There's men that develop autoimmune diseases. Like this is not the answer to autoimmune diseases. But along with the genetic predisposition, there are a few papers showing that yes, but it matters on your genetic makeup. One, I'm going to simplify it as you have to be predisposed to the autoimmune disease, right? And
Mhm.
then you have to be exposed to a certain paternal allele. Not all paternal alleles,
Mm.
but certain ones can trigger that reaction. So
Mm.
it's like the perfect match to create the autoimmune disease. And so, yes, I think there's pretty good data to show that in those scenarios, it can trigger a reaction.
Fascinating stuff. Um, so we've gotten to maternal fetal conflict, we've gotten to microchimerism.
Yes.
Um, there's still another area of your research that I'm very curious about, which is cancer and the evolution of cancer.
Hmm.
Um, from an evolutionary perspective, it makes a lot of sense to me why we would be vulnerable to pathogens like bacteria and viruses, because the bacteria and viruses, they win in some sense. Like they're
Hmm.
evolving to invade us and exploit us. Whereas with
We're their
cancer, it's a
food.
little,
We're their food. Yeah. Like
yeah,
they
Yes.
want to eat
exactly.
us. Yeah. They
Yeah,
want to eat
kind
us
of.
and have babies. That's their
Yeah,
goal.
Yes.
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, and we're just at odds. So that I can wrap my head around, but cancer is a little more mysterious and hard for me
Yes.
to have my wrap my head around because those are my cells and they're hurting
Yes.
me. What are they, why are they doing that? And why hasn't evolution gotten rid of that?
I love this question. Um, okay. Um, we have a few answers for you. One is we cells had to suppress their own interest to become a multicellular body, right?
Mm.
We used to be single-celled organisms that could just multiply. We started having to cooperate once we became a multicellular body, and you suppress your cellular fitness for the multicellular fitness, right?
That's
Right.
crazy. It's
Yeah.
so
And
cool. It's such a weird, I mean, it makes total sense when you say it out loud, but it's such a, I
yes.
mean, as a macro, a macro, a micro, a multicellular organism myself, I find it's counter to my personal experience, but that is tautological, right? But no, that's amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have conservation of genes that have persisted since we were single cell organisms. And so some of that is still
Wow.
in there, right?
Mm.
Huh.
And so we have these multicellular organisms. And the bigger you get, the more cells you get, the better you are at competing for mates and resources and all this stuff. And so in certain organisms, it's in your best interest to have a lot of cells, right?
Mm.
And cancer is a disease of cells. Okay. And when you have a lot of them, you end up having to control them, and they end up, when they're proliferating, mutating and causing mutations that knock out their basically cooperative behaviors. And they
Mm.
become selfish again. And they start dividing. And then there's a different selection going on there where they're now um, dividing for their own self-interest instead of the interest of the multicellular organism.
Hmm.
That,
And
oh, go ahead.
oh, sorry. And the reason that we don't get rid of it is because there's trade-offs in that. There's selection for growth and survival and reproduction. And we see these genes that are important for cancer are sometimes important for implantation and fertilization. And so they're
Huh.
getting selected early and then they get turned back on later on.
Mm.
Wow. Would this be an example of, I think it's Peter Medawar came up with this theory of aging, where the idea is that genes that might give you a fitness advantage early in life but impose a fitness cost later in life will be selected for in an organism. And insofar as those genes accumulate over time, the genome will accumulate features that will sort of cause the body to break down in late age, the
Mhm.
further the organism gets past reproduction and the further away from the window of selection that evolution will be focusing on. Um, I always found that theory of aging really fascinating. It seems like this might be an example of that, where that help you with gestation or implantation early in life actually increase cancer risk later in life, and this would actually be an example of Medowarin aging.
Yeah, and it is that. And what we see, and it's a little nuanced now because I think we're humans and we do things that increase our risk of cancer through our lifestyle, like as smoking and, various other things, being out in the sun too much. But in general, cancer is a disease of aging. It is, if you look across many different populations, it's an old age disease, right?
Mm.
And it's after basically the soma and the mutations have accumulated. But that's not it. It's not just mutation accumulation because there's been some really great studies that look at like normal healthy tissue and they have like the mutation profile of a cancer.
Hmm.
And so, along with the mutations, there's a breakdown in the body as we age, right?
Hmm.
And so, suddenly our immune system isn't working as well. Our immune system can clean it all out. The tissue fitness matters. And so, suddenly the cancer cells have a competitive edge. Right
Mm.
now, when the cancer cells are in a multicellular body of a really healthy individual, and I say healthy, but a young individual that has, good luck too. The neighboring cells actually can suppress it. But suddenly the neighboring cells get older as well, and the tissue fitness landscape changes. And that's when cancer cells suddenly have a competitive edge and kind of outcompete the healthy non-cancerous tissue.
Mm. Is this why, is there, I mean, this seems like a dumb question, but is there evidence that exercise helps or prevent cancer in the sense of like, I always hear Dan Lieberman quote of like diseases of old age or diseases of sedentism, like, and if you look at populations that are more
Mhm.
active, all else equal, is that true? Or,
Yeah, it's true with cancer too. It's not everything. Cancer is like genetics. You can have
yeah, yeah,
underlying genetics that
yeah,
just predispose you to it. Bad luck. There's a lot of bad luck in cancer. And it's just you just like our genomes, we got 3 billion base pairs.
yeah,
What mutations that land in an important cancer suppression gene
yeah,
is sometimes just bad luck,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And then the other component is lifestyle. And so they do see, yes, exercise is a huge impact on being protective against cancer.
and
Yeah.
presumably that's like the immune system and maybe health of cells sort of
Yes.
if to again gloss a lot, but that's sort of yeah.
Gloss a lot, and then in general, exercise, even though it could be like while you're exercising, it's acute inflammatory. It it pulls in some anti-inflammatory mechanisms afterwards. And so again, our immune system's always our double-edged sword, where it can help us fight the things that are trying to eat us, the bacteria and the viruses. But when it creates too much chaos, it also promotes these cells to
Yeah.
survive and thrive in a cancer-rich environment.
Yeah.
So
So when you're studying this stuff, are you like have you been thinking so this sounds like a lot like the immune system is important. Like you talked about the immune system. So
yeah,
clearly like the immune system, there's been selection to keep these microchimeric cells
yeah,
in the body, and the immune
yes,
system has evolved, co-evolved with the presence to allow them.
yes.
I don't even know what my question is, but like what's up with
I
that?
have an answer for that,
Okay, cool.
but it's my new project.
Oh, cool.
Um, I think yes. So we looked at cancer. I'm going to take the long way there, though. Um, So we looked at when cancer arose across the tree of life. And so we
Whoa.
see with most multicellular organisms, there's at least some evidence that they can get cancer or cancer-like
Hmm.
properties. Okay, even plants. While plants don't have a vascular system like we do, so it's not so impactful. But once we get into maybe vertebrates or even, mammals, we see cancer that is prevalent across the tree. It's ubiquitous across many different animals, but the rates vary, right? And so I would argue that most organisms are not completely cancer resistant, but some are actually really good at not getting cancer, better than humans, right? And so if we look across the tree of life, we also see that mammals in particular get more cancer than
Mm,
other groups when we compare them to birds and lizards and various other organisms.
mm,
And so, what is it about mammals that makes us so different? Some of it is one where, we have to internally gestate and we have placentas, and placentas look very much like cancer in some
mm,
sense because they invade and they recruit blood vessels and they do growth in the body. And so is it that because we're placental mammals,
mm,
we also have this blind spot? And so
mm,
one of the ideas is potentially, yes, maybe our immune system cannot be as robust as we'd like it to be because we have to be able to recognize and be okay with different genomes being in our body.
mm. Amazing.
Hmm.
That's just what I think, though, by the way.
Yeah. No, that's the
It's not, I don't
yeah,
know if that's
yeah,
like a
yeah, yeah,
community-wide
yeah.
consensus.
That's a
And
fascinating hypothesis.
yeah, and also my understanding is like, and maybe this is just noise, but like things like dogs, like certain dogs get like labs get really high
Oh,
rates of cancer, and
yes,
it's in the any of the placenta like grows really fast too. Like I mean,
yes,
a lot of this feels like it's a lot of it is sort of maybe developmental things too. So like the immune
right,
system has this issue of like, is this a
yes,
developing offspring? Is this my development, or is it cancer? That's a hard problem, right? Yeah,
yes,
to tease apart.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. No, and dogs do get more cancer. They're domesticated. We think a lot of it has to do with like inbreeding. So a lot of
Oh
the
yeah.
domesticated
Right.
species, and so we bred them to look real cute, but they
Yeah.
came with a baggage in their genetic,
Yeah. Yeah.
predisposition for disease in
Yes.
general.
Yeah.
Other
Hmm.
species that get a lot of cancer are like ferrets and hamsters. We think
Hmm.
we have this like life history perspective when we're studying cancer, where we think like these fast life history strategies that just go, reproduce, live shortly. You will not evolve defenses against cancer because you're not living
Mm.
long enough. You're going to get, eaten by a hawk, right?
Right.
Hmm.
And then on the other end, you have these species such as humans, but also elephants and whales that grow really big and slowly. It's in their best interest to maintain their soma, and that means also cancer defense, right? Like
Yeah.
making sure you're dividing your cells carefully, there's no mutations, you have, enhanced immune activity and various things to prune cancer-like cells from
Yeah.
them.
Is there any is there any evidence that like these immune responses or the genetics of offspring, what consequences other than the immune system lets them exist? I mean, it sounds like this might be the edge of science or we don't know. What what do we know of like what consequence they're having on the mother or on us? Like
Right.
do we know?
We don't know. There's a few papers. So going back to, I love that we're jumping from, sometimes people think I study these two very distinct topics, but we're we're
Yeah,
just
no, it
going,
seems like
we're
it's all
they
related.
relate.
Yeah.
So yeah, the fetal cell, there's some really great studies to show the mother is sending cells to the baby that are clearly important for immune education. There's,
Right.
passive immunity through antibodies being sent to the baby, right? That are really important for survival, especially if it's an infection that's happening in real time, right? But
Hmm.
also immune cells are going to the baby as well. That's an amazing, the immune system is completely naive for the baby, and the
Yeah.
mom has already had this lifetime experience of exposure and is now passing cells on,
Yeah. And that is
right?
that through placenta and breast milk?
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yes, it goes through the placenta and then again through the breast milk. There's maternal cells being passed on. Fetal cells get a little bit trickier because those are the baby cells going to the mother.
Right.
What the heck could they be doing that could actually impact the mother's survival and reproductive success? And again, like you had mentioned, it could be like just this burst of young stem cells
Mm.
that and there's some data to show potentially yes, there's some mouse models that show that these cells can track to sites of injury and
Mm.
help repair it. There's
That's so cool.
there was one paper that showed they looked at women in their C-section scars and they were able to find baby cells, fetal cells there. And they were
Wow.
like expressing collagen, which is really important for, healing the C-section. So yeah, some of it is maybe it's just a burst of new cells, like,
Yeah.
um, and there's one paper out looking again broad scale at like male origin microchimerism. So not even like being specific about the baby, but just looking at Y chromosome in women. And they found women decades later that tested positive for male origin microchimerism lived longer.
Wow. Wow.
So there could be some potential benefits.
Yeah.
And we don't know why some women we can detect these cells in them, and other times we cannot detect any cells after they've given birth. I think
Hmm.
it's more our methodology of not being able to detect rare cells than them not being there. But
Yeah. And how new, I mean, this sounds like, as you alluded to earlier, it sounds like this science is very much dependent on genetic sequencing being faster and cheaper. How old is this? I mean, you said we've known
yes,
some of these things, but like is this a case where the change in technology has allowed this research area to proliferate such that it's now feasible to do this at any
yeah,
scale? Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Like it was, 100 years ago, we knew that this was potential that cells were coming over. Everyone just thought again, it was a byproduct of this spillover effect, right?
Right.
Of being a deeply invasive placenta. And it wasn't until like the early 90s, I believe, was the first paper that showed, oh no, these cells stay around. And that like had a mind shift. Suddenly evolutionary biologists were interested in it too. Like, wait, like these cells are persisting. Do they have a function? And is it a function that's important for that body, actually?
Mm.
And have we co-evolved it? So we expect that, right? Relationship to happen. So
Mm. And then if I can have my mother's cells in me, can I have my grandmother's cells in me?
yes, we
Okay.
think so. There's one
Okay.
paper that has shown it, right? But of course, there's this route, and there's one paper that showed that, yeah, grandmother cells were in the cord blood. So we think that that's possible. And you can imagine a scenario where there's a group of cells that just get really good at jumping generation to generation,
Yeah.
right? And it can go on for potentially a really long time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sort of beautiful in a way, right? It's yeah. I to be slightly like poetic about it, but yeah, there's something cool about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you literally have bits of your grandma in you potentially.
yes.
Like,
Yes. I
um,
know. And then you hear things like, oh, she looks a lot like grandma. Like there's a cousin, and the
yeah,
cousin's like, they look a lot like grandma. And I'm like, what if,
Yeah.
what if it was more grandma than we know,
Oh yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
these cells
yeah.
are coming over. What's the what's the potential that it can actually like be a part of the germline or insert really early into development? And yeah, have more of a chimerism effect than a microchimerism effect.
Wow.
It's like painting such a messier picture of nature than what I might be accustomed to, where it's just like these cells and DNA strands are just sloshing around, and I still got bits of my grandma in me. Like it's just so much messier than I would think. I don't know. It's
Yeah,
really
Yes.
horizontal
interesting.
transmission really screws me up too. Like
Yes.
if when you add that in, you're like, oh my God, yeah, this is yeah.
Uh,
Yep.
this might seem like a dumb question, but I'm curious. Would you expect differences between mammals and marsupial mammals where the gestation isn't quite as internal? would you expect, say, less microchimerism, less autoimmune diseases, perhaps less cancer?
This is a great question. We're trying to look at that. We don't know if there's microchimerism in marsupials. I think there is. Um,
Okay.
I've I've had some leads on some marsupial blood before, but we haven't had a chance to look at it. Um, but potentially. And then the other thing that is complicated is, yeah, you could maybe suggest um, less cancer. So there's marsupials that have a very placenta-like structure that's really quick, and then they go to the pouch, right? And then across mammals, there's basically three different invasion type of placentas, from a very surface invasion to some kind of integration into a super invasive placenta. And it's assumed that organisms that have the super invasive placenta have the most microchimerism. And there's also predictions that those organisms have the most cancer. Like there's a stepwise. The more invasive a placenta gets, the more cancer we should see.
Hmm.
We do not see that in my data.
Oh, okay.
It's like a really nice theory. It's in
Yeah.
evolutionary medicine textbooks. It's much messier than that. And so with the marsupials, what we see is that they could have went through some genetic bottlenecks. And actually, some of them get a lot of cancer,
Hmm.
but it might have nothing to do with the relationship with the placenta. It could be just other factors. And actually, the Tasmanian devils, have you heard of the Tasmanian devils?
Well, I've
They're
seen Looney Tunes, so yes,
yes,
I'm
yes.
totally familiar.
Yes. These creatures actually, they're marsupials. They're not like the Looney Tunes character in the sense that they spin all around, but they are a little crazy and they're very bitey creatures.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And they have developed a transmissible cancer.
Whoa.
So
Hmm.
that is, they have a tumor on their face that existed on a devil hundreds of years ago. And it still persists, and they just transfer cells, not a virus, cancer cells from an individual that is no longer alive.
Whoa.
And it's pretty detrimental to the Tasmanian devils. They may go extinct because of this.
Wow.
Wow.
Um, and not only once has this evolved, but now there's a second strain of transmissible cancer. So again, it's
Wow.
cancer cells that are hopping from host to host to host.
Wow. And they can't, it wouldn't, does it cross species? Like if a Tasmanian devil bit on their organism, it's not.
It has not crossed species. There's transmissible cancers in bivalves too, like mussels,
Oh, wow.
and those have crossed species.
Whoa.
Oh man. I
Um,
mean, that's a great topic for the next pandemic movie is a contagious cancer.
right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Gets spread
yes.
from the Tasmanian devil.
Well, you have to be bitey, right? Like we've talked a
Yeah.
lot about like why don't we have contagious cancer, right?
Yeah.
And their dogs have a contagious cancer as well, and it's
Oh,
sexually
okay.
transmitted.
Huh.
Um, and it's treatable. But it's from a dog that again lived like 10,000 years ago, and the cells still persist.
Wow.
It's really mind-blowing. But yeah, the routes to transmission, if you wanted to pass cancer cells back and forth, you need to either be bitey or it has to be a sexually transmitted type of thing, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Um,
So is the clam biting people?
no,
What
well,
is
here's the
happening?
other thing that, or you live in the ocean.
Right, of course, because the
Because
Right.
things
you're
just
like,
float
we're not
around.
just
Yeah.
like sucking in
Yeah.
cells as we move
Yeah.
through our
Yeah. Yeah.
environment.
Yeah.
Land
Oh,
animals
yeah, that's true.
have
Because I always think about like,
different constraints.
vectors like
Yes,
mosquitoes. But yeah, the ocean is like a whole vector.
it's a whole thing. It's a
Yeah.
whole nother world. Yes.
Whole other
That's
So,
world down
true.
there. Yeah.
Truly wild and bizarre, this contagious face cancer business.
yes.
Uh,
It's like put
uh,
that on a t-shirt or something.
yeah.
It's very weird. Yeah.
Yes.
But I'm struggling to wrap my head around it because it makes sense that cancer might evolve in me if I'm really old and my tissues are damaged, my immune system isn't so great, and there's been a lot of time for the cells in my body to accumulate mutations that might serve the self-interest of the cell at the expense of the rest of the body. And so it makes sense that my body might have a hard time tamping down on the cancer. But
Right.
once it gets into someone else's body, particularly someone else who's young and healthy, then it's a whole
Yeah.
different ballgame. And so
Yeah.
how does the cancer survive once it gets to someone else's body?
Yeah. Yeah, so there's been studies looking at humans, and there's only been a few cases. One is transferring through pregnancy. Unfortunately,
Mm,
cancers can
Wow.
metastasize. But other than that, we're pretty good at saying, no, that is not me. I reject it. The immune system rejects it. When it comes to the Tasmanian devils, and sorry, I didn't complete the full story because we talked about genetic bottlenecks. Seems like the Tasmanian devils went through a genetic bottleneck and they have reduction of their MHC receptors, their self-non-self receptors.
mm,
And that reduced genetic diversity has allowed them to not be able to recognize that as non-self
mm.
as
Wow.
much as it should. So unfortunately, the it was like a combination, the perfect storm for the
Like just
Tasmanian
bad luck,
devils.
as you said. Like it's just
Yes,
this example
it's
of
just
just like a
bad luck.
species level bad luck, basically. Like,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I love this new picture of nature where just shit happens, there's bad luck, things are sloshing around, everything's
Yeah.
messy and all over the
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
Like
And
oh my
somehow we
goodness.
survive.
I know. Yeah, no.
somehow.
Again, as a multicellular
And
organism,
we live for
yeah,
a really long time too.
yeah. No, it's a miracle. It's amazing. All
Yes.
this, anything works at all. It's really
Yes.
when you mentioned evolutionary medicine. We haven't really
Yes.
talked about
Oh yeah.
that. Um, I don't want to go away from what you're an expert in or what you're, but can you talk about sort of like how you view, I don't know, I don't even know enough about you. You're the expert in evolutionary medicine. You are an instance of sitting in that Venn
Hmm.
diagram of basic research and then people maybe doing medicine. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I don't even know what to ask because I don't know enough. So, yeah.
Yes. It's so funny. So I teach evolutionary medicine. I'm teaching it right now at
Mm,
UCSB.
mm,
And the first day I always ask the students, even though there's a description, they don't know what the class is.
yeah. Yeah. It's
And I
like
always
what?
ask them what they think evolutionary medicine is.
Yeah.
And it says how evolution evolved over time. And that's not what
Right.
evolutionary medicine
How
is.
medicine changed over time.
Yeah, how medicine changed over
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But evolutionary medicine is, the why we get sick. Okay,
Mm,
so a lot of the medical field. So I did my PhD in a med school, and so it was a lot of the mechanisms, this protein, this gene, this, factor, the, proximate mechanisms of the disease. And then
right.
evolutionary medicine takes a step back and says, well, why are we vulnerable in the first place? Why are we vulnerable to cancer? Why are we, vulnerable to these specific diseases? What is it in our evolutionary history or past? Are there trade-offs? Are there constraints that we're vulnerable for this sickness?
Mm,
And I think it's a really powerful way to view diseases. Some have argued that maybe it doesn't have such a practical impact sometimes, where it's like, oh, cool, it's because we're multicellular. Like, what now, right?
yeah.
In terms of cancer. But then other times it does have a really interesting point of view, because then it's like, oh, but other species that have also are multicellular get less cancer than humans. So what have they done? So we can take
Right.
this comparative approach when we're looking deep in the phylogenies. But then also some really great ways evolutionary medicine is moving forward in like a clinical sense is trying to understand both antibiotic resistance and chemotherapy resistance, because
Hmm.
they're following principles of evolution,
Yeah.
right? Bacteria, we provide a selective pressure, they respond, they evolve resistance. Same thing with cancer cells, actually. That mass that's in your body can start evolving, right? It's operating on principles of natural selection. And when it comes to treatment, we could maybe harness these principles of evolution to do a better job at avoiding resistance, because the problem with medicine, such as antibiotics or chemotherapy, we hit a dead end when we hit resistance
Mm.
and we don't have any more drugs to provide the patient, right? So if we could avoid resistance, we might be better off, and the patient might do better. And so there's such great work looking at how you steer the evolution of a bacteria population or a cancer cell population to where you want it to go in
Oh,
terms of
wow.
their evolutionary trajectory. And I think that is so cool.
Mhm. So
Sort of like
like just oh
domesticating
yeah,
the
Yes,
yeah,
bacteria.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
exactly.
interesting.
And
yeah.
yes, and there's all these ecologists that have jumped in, especially in the like cancer world, where it's like, okay, here's a scenario that I see in ecology. So you have, a rabbit, right, that's out in the savannah, and there's a hawk coming for it, okay? And so the rabbit, what does it do? It darts under a bush. Where are all the snakes? They're hiding in the bush,
Mm.
right? How do we do that same principle for
Yeah.
cancer? Like,
Oh,
how can
nice.
we switch the ecology to end up tricking them into their own demise, basically?
Right. So like
So,
yeah, so like a example just like concretely would be some I mean like this is still I have no idea, but just to make sure I understand would be something like you have bacteria that feed on something and you select for those bacteria that are really efficient at feeding on this thing, but then that thing that you've selected those bacteria for, then if in a generation later is
mhm.
the vehicle of drug delivery. So you've
Right.
selected for the
Yes,
bacteria that are
exactly.
super good
Yes,
at
yes,
uptaking this
yes.
material,
Let's
and
give you
then
all the
yeah,
resources.
and you
Yes,
Trojan horse the drug later, and then you're like,
yes,
boom, and they just take it up super well. Yeah.
yes. So there's these ideas circulating. Another one that's really prevalent right now is actually let's give less drug. Let's
Mm,
not create resistance in the first place,
right.
because what we realize, especially, just going to, the same principles apply to both, but I'm just going to talk about cancer biology, is in a tumor, you have a bunch of cells that maybe can respond to the drug, but there's already cells that are resistant to the drug. And so you're benefiting the tumor if you kill all the cells that are responding to your drug, because then the cells that are resistant have this competitive release. And then all of a sudden, oh no, your drug doesn't work anymore for that population. But what if you kept the resistant cells and the sensitive cells within the same tumor, and they competed for resources?
Mm,
And what you did then was just knock down the tumor smaller,
wow.
um, but still had control over the tumor.
Yeah, it's
Like
really
it's all
smart.
about
Yeah.
staying, but that psychologically will have to change our way of how we think about cancer.
Yeah.
Because right now there's like the war on cancer, like all of these
Yeah.
metaphors about you got to get rid of
It's like
everything,
a
you got to get rid of
contamination.
everything.
It's like dirt and you've got to
Yes,
clean it out. It's like a very
right.
it's like a pathogen
Right. And
metaphor. Yeah.
maybe it's this view that we are this one uniform thing, right?
Yes.
Instead of this
Yeah.
messy thing. And so once there is this idea that, oh, we can maybe treat cancer as diabetes, where, it's we're not going for cure, we're going for control
Yeah.
of the disease. It's been really hard to
Mm,
kind of get people wrapped around that mentality. But there are a few clinical trials out there working on exactly doing that. Same drug that is already passed and given to patients, but just at lower doses, and only responding when the tumor responds to it.
yeah, it's so interesting. Metaphors of like science or physiology. It's really interesting. I never thought about like
Yes.
metaphors of like how to think about medicine. But yeah, that's going
Hmm.
to totally affect the way, physicians or the applied folks are going to use things.
Hmm.
And one of the things sort of implicit in a lot of our science is we change the metaphors we use as we learn more, but maybe that
Yes.
hasn't spread, is sort of what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And the thing is, fortunately enough, many times there could be a cure, right? There's many people that, I'm not saying this is everyone, like there's many people that get cancer and do chemotherapy and it works, and they're 5 years, 10 years, no sign of disease, right? And so it's one, figuring out who falls into
Mm,
what category. When is it a cure case? When is it a case where we're just going to do long-term treatment?
right.
And then the whole treatment regime should be, how do we avoid resistance?
Mm,
So,
super
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. If
It's I love this, replacing the metaphor of destruction and conquest into like herding and domestication, like dealing with the
yes,
living organism and
yes.
and trying to understand how it evolves on its own terms and using that
mm,
um, to
Yes.
control the disease.
Yeah, and we have a lot of patient advocates that we work with, and some of them just are definitely very open to the idea, especially when they've been living with the disease for so long. Is it's like it's a part of me. Why don't I go ahead and name it? And like we're like owning this part of who we are becoming in this stage of our lives, right? And
mm,
so, yeah, I think it can be really impactful.
yeah. In that, those are great examples of evolutionary medicine. How far in, how much has evolutionary medicine invaded medicine? So I mean, like, because a lot of people
Yes,
talk about even things we really know about, like doctors don't do, like the basic research and that getting translated to what doctors do, especially in the US, where there's lots of sort of decisions made on sort of not getting sued as opposed to what's medically or scientifically best.
right.
Do you have a sense of either just, from the historical perspective of like, is evolutionary medicine being incorporated into day-to-day medicine, or is that still really a tragedy and that things could be better?
Yeah, I don't think we're there yet. Like when I was in grad school, it was really hard to, I was the evolutionary person in a sea of, people that weren't interested in the evolutionary perspective. And, we spent most of our time explaining why evolution was useful in human health, right?
Mm,
And I still see that potentially the case today with few exceptions, in terms of antibiotic resistance or something. We know that the bacteria are evolving. And so there is some uptake of trying to understand evolutionary principles for that. But I think in general, it's still a completely different track. It is not taught in med schools, or rarely taught in med schools. There's been a big push for evolutionary medicine to be more incorporated into medical school um, um, course structures and stuff like that. And then at the end of the day, I've talked to a lot of physicians, and this might be true. Like they have so much on their plate that they don't care if you were inspired by evolution.
right. They still just want
Like,
to know what's happening.
does
How
your
does it
drug
work? Yeah.
work?
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. Like, we're working on something that potentially a species in nature, like elephants, are really good at not getting cancer. If we use that mechanism and then suddenly it works to treat human cancers, how many people care that, we were inspired by evolution? Some
Right.
people might, but
Right.
like the general public's like, can it treat the disease I am seeing patients die of?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think, yeah, there's room for evolution in the medical curriculum, but also there's room for maybe us to do it and then provide
Right.
the more practical bench side approaches that they
Right.
get.
But I mean, still, even in basic research, I mean, my understanding is in medicine, there's still like, you don't know if something's going to become a solution to a problem. You just don't know, right? So you have to
Yes.
invest in, things that, yeah, and there's all kinds of examples of, somebody was studying some like slime mold or,
Yeah.
like a sea cucumber, and it led to like this transformative discovery. Um,
Yes.
is there enough of that kind of investment in from an evolutionary perspective? Because I mean, I assume, or maybe it's
Right.
wrong. Like I don't know. Maybe you're going to tell me something that is terrifying, that there's very little investment in basic risky research that might have a payout. I don't know. Yeah. Easy question.
Talk to
Yeah.
talk to the grant funders.
Yeah.
NIH, not so much.
Really?
We've been funded by the NIH to study like cancer in animals with
Yeah.
the like eye towards how do we make it, into humans, like
Mm.
how do we translate what we learn from cancer
Yeah.
across the tree of life into humans? It's been hard. It's been considered risky. It's been like really difficult to provide this. But same thing, we don't know what we're going to learn in basic biology. So GLP-1, which is the drug everyone is obsessed with suddenly, and it's really great for treating individuals with diabetes, was discovered in basic biology studying the Gila monster.
Wow.
It was one single amino acid change that made it, a difference between the human version and that has made a difference in human biology. They were not trying to study the Gila monster to treat human and weight loss and diabetes, right? It was
Yeah.
just a basic biology discovery. And so yes, I think it's a shame that we don't have more funding sources towards basic biology research where it's not so driven where you have these deliverables at the end of the day.
Yeah.
The NSF is obviously more keen um, to fund stuff that is on that level of basic biology and just understanding a species biology. But when we try and write grants for there, they're like, whoa, 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 you're working on a human disease. Like, go to the NIH. And so,
Mm.
unfortunately, there is like this evolutionary medicine falls into this like really in between that ends up being left behind in many of these programs because we're interested in evolutionary perspectives on disease in humans. And there's like, yeah.
That's crazy. I mean, it really sounds like the funding presupposes what the best way to get to the solution. And I
Yes.
imagine if you looked, the probably evolutionary medicine has a much more efficient track record than these assumptions, I would
Right.
suspect. Yeah.
I mean, we argue evolution has provided a roadmap for us to understand cancer. There are some species that do not get much cancer at all. We almost consider them resistant. Why are we not studying these more and
Yeah.
providing so many funds? They're mammals potentially like us. It's already proven for millions and millions of years for this species. How can we not translate that better into human biology? So,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
natural selection is just an incredible, much better than any pharmaceutical company at creating substances. It's had much longer,
Much more R&D.
much more
Yeah.
R&D,
Mhm.
more R&D than you'll
Yes.
ever have time for. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's
Yes.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Although, I mean, I'm in the academic world, there are tons of startups that are looking at this. They're
Mm.
like bio-inspired medicine that are turning to look at species for various things, not just cancer, but tons of different health issues in humans. So, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Have you? David, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say, like, obviously we're seeing similar resistance to evolutionary perspectives in the social sciences as well,
Hmm.
in psychiatry and mental health as well. There's the uptake is very slow. And it's obviously a big part of the reason why Dave and I have started this podcast is to try to push things along in that direction.
Hmm.
We're about
But I,
halfway there. We've made a huge dent.
oh yeah, I mean,
We've
next year
we've
everyone's going to
fundamentally
be.
changed the
Hey, you guys have a good
the
trajectory. You're
public.
getting followers. It's
Oh yeah,
great.
no,
Yes.
yeah, yes, but yes, no, the United States will be fine with evolution by like next spring. Yeah, we'll be fine. It's
Definitely.
good. Yeah. Okay, sorry, David. Go ahead.
Anyway, yeah, I'm just
Because of interjections like that. That's why. Yeah.
yeah, we can't even get our names right in the
I know,
introduction. We
exactly.
think we're going to
Yes,
change
exactly.
the face of
Exactly. Yes.
American science. No,
Yes.
uh, so yeah, I want to know why. Like, what is the resistance? I mean, I get your point that with medicine, there's a certain urgency, and there's a certain callousness to daydreaming about evolution when people are dying, right? Like you need to get a practical solution right now, and we don't have time for you to think about evolutionary theory and cancer and elephants and microchimerism. Like people are dying, focus on what's happening right now. And like
Mhm.
I get that perspective on an intuitive level. Like I understand it. There's a bit less of that excuse when it comes to social science and mental health, I think. Really, there's really no excuse there. Like the whole point is to understand the human condition, the human mind, how humans are embedded in their social structures, and how they, can achieve, well-being in their lives. Like it seems like evolution should be moving at a faster pace as a meta theory for encompassing that stuff. So yeah, I don't know. Do you have an intuition about why the uptake is so slow?
I think one, there isn't good, and we know this in this country, an evolutionary perspective in general in our education,
Mm,
right? Like I don't like if you go and I the difference is shocking if I have colleagues working in the UK.
mm,
And I feel like culturally they have a more naturalistic upbringing in their education where everyone, even if you're not teaching evolution, it's kind of embedded a bit more. And I think there is just such a divide in the US about even talking about evolution and bringing it in. And like, it's huge, but I see these differences. Like when I talk to, you know, individuals in the UK about like, oh, species evolution at the zoo and like all like it's just yeah, it's the same. And then you come here and like it's a mess. Like no no one agrees or says you can't say that or you can't do this. And so I don't know. I wonder if some of it is how we educate our children and how that is culturally different from the US and other countries as well. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know why it's such a struggle to get evolution in more mainstream thinking. I
yeah.
mean, I guess the other thing is there's obviously people who have done things that made it harder for us by misusing it,
Mm,
right? By misusing how evolution works in various ways. We see this, today with people on platforms saying that like, oh, this is how you should eat or this is how you should think because evolutionarily that's what we're like made to do, and
Yeah.
that's not evolutionary medicine
right.
either,
Yeah. Eat a
right? So
Right.
pound of
there's
bacon. Eat a pound of bacon. Yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah.
and so that's problematic. You have
Yeah.
these misguided
Totally.
efforts that use evolution as an excuse for terrible things. So,
Yeah. No, I mean, that's totally true. I mean, but you also see that in like general, there's like pseudoscience in general. There's
right.
perversions of mainstream science, but it doesn't tarnish our image of science itself when a few crackpots have some stupid ideas. But when a few crackpots in the evolutionary sciences have some stupid ideas, then it somehow tarnishes the entire evolutionary perspective in a way that it doesn't for other sciences. I don't know. I really don't know why that is. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know, but don't you think I mean like people it does tarnish science a little bit. Like going back to
Yes.
yeah.
Jurassic Park. I mean, there's like
Yes.
there's been like 33 decades of like anti-science propaganda movies. I mean, or like, or
Yes.
like reasonably enough like for people are like, the Jurassic Park quote of like you were spending so much time thinking about if you should, you didn't think about, or if you could. Oh man, I totally butchered that.
Yes.
I
Yes.
should edit that out. No, the Ian Malcolm line of like you spend so
Yes.
much time thinking if you could, you didn't spend any time thinking if you should, right? Like
Yes.
Yeah.
that's a
Yes.
especially in like a very like we people have been the victims of all kinds of
Right.
research, especially in the US, in the 20th
Yeah.
century. Like that's pretty historically documented. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so hard to get misinformation away once it's tarnished. I guess the other
Yeah.
one, like once it hits mainstream, and I think evolutionary psychology and all that is sexy enough where it hits mainstream, and then
Yeah.
you really can't. And another relevant one that also hit mainstream that is completely not true is like the vaccines cause autism.
Yeah.
That researcher, Andrew Wakefield, lost his license and was like, "Yeah, I made that all up." And people like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
Yeah.
can read all
Yeah.
about it. There's books, there's all
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
information to
Yeah.
prove that that is not true. Yet here we are, and that's tarnished the field. There's such hesitancy
Yeah.
in vaccine research, vaccine distribution. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's these sticky topics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although yeah, and I guess that's like a for another episode where we talk about conspiracies and
Yes.
redirection of the people who are out to get you. Often the people who are exploiting people are incentivized to have another set of people being the scapegoats of who's exploiting the people. Yeah.
Yeah. And it might very well be fields most vulnerable where you get this confirmation bias,
Mm.
right? Like we're really
Mm.
bad at that, where it's like, oh yeah, yep, I knew a child that got a
Yeah.
vaccine,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like, yep,
Yeah.
so yes, that's true. And maybe
Right.
very similar for things in evolutionary psychology where people are like, yeah, I know, like that makes sense to me. And like
Mm.
where other things maybe are not so vulnerable to these confirmation biases, and so then don't have such a
Yeah.
controversy around them, right? Where you
Yeah.
can't get rid of that misinformation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Amy, you're just slightly changed topic. You're in an anthropology department, but you kind of talked at the beginning about sort of feeling like you're not in any one, or you sort of have a yeah. How did you so what is that like? And do you do like collaborations with people in the field, or and then also another question, I don't know, I'm asking you two different questions all the time, but the other
Yes.
question is, you mentioned you were originally like in medical school. Did you know you wanted to do evolution? Like how did you get um
Yeah.
like maybe it's the same question, which is sort of like, how did you get to where you are and where are you now? And
Yes.
do you still feel like you don't quite fit anywhere? Is that,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay, next question.
Um,
Yeah.
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 No. No, I had no idea what I was doing in undergrad. Like I went to a community college, was like, I like biology,
Yeah.
went on to like, a university, still didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was like, I should apply to grad school because then I can be a forever student and not have to deal with adult life stuff. And so I did know that I wanted to work with humans and humans somehow. Um, and actually, when I was in undergrad, I was struggling between biology and then anthropology,
Hmm.
right? Because all of my biology classes were like biology of plants and, like things that just didn't excite me in the same way human biology excited me. And then when you want to study human biology, a lot of times you have to be in a med school to study. We really do separate our fields a little weird. So we're using the same principles when we study ecology and all of this stuff, but like humans, we put them in a different room, a different school. It's a silo effect. Um, and so just on luck, I applied to get my PhD. It was still locally. There was no necessarily rhyme or reason to why I went to the school I went to other than I had to stay in the Detroit area.
Hmm.
Um, and so, but there, my mind became more open to evolutionary biology. I'd already taken classes. There was a faculty member there kind of looking at evolutionary principles to cancer already. There was another one looking at evolutionary of the placenta. Like all of this was kind of feeding through my graduate experience in terms of, and then of course, Randy Nesse at the time, who was one of the big drivers of the field of evolutionary medicine. So I was in Detroit. He was in Ann Arbor. So that was just an hour away from where we were. And so we, as grad students, would all drive up when he had
Hmm.
evolutionary medicine seminars and watch them. And that's where we're all like, whoa, this putting it together is just so cool. And so, yeah, from there I went to do a postdoc and we ended up at like the Department of Surgery, but it was at such a very specific posting about studying life history theory in cancer biology.
Hmm.
And I just thought I wanted that opportunity and I was able to get it. And yeah, so it's kind of where I went. And so, yeah, there was in the Department of Surgery. And then we went at Arizona State University We were kind of split between various departments, and there was a Center for Evolutionary Medicine there. So, but yeah, I think anthropology does all that. That's why it's accepting of evolutionary medicine, is that anthropology is already this very broad field that has to take many different perspectives and kind of mush it all together to understand humans. We're understanding social circles, we're understanding culture. We look at the biology, we look at evolutionary history. We're kind of adding all that in. And so, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And
Yeah.
do you feel like is the UCSB Anthro department in terms of the biology, the human biology, is that sort of a strength in that department or?
Yeah, I think so. There's many times where the students are like, "This is biology," and I'm like, "Yes." I hate that when it's like when you say you're a biological anthropologist, they think you're less of both somehow.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Like you combined them, you're a hybrid. You're like one of those bikes that can't go like fast on the road, but also is bad at climbing a
Right,
mountain.
right,
Like,
right.
but
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, it's like a lot of us are human biologists, we are biologists, we have wet labs, we have like NIH funding, but also we're studying humans. So we're in the anthropology department. And actually, a lot of the biology is conserved. So when I'm
right.
teaching genetics, yes, you're learning fruit fly genetics. That will eventually get to human genetics, but
Yeah.
a lot of the stuff is conserved biology across systems.
Yeah. We had a recent episode where we haven't released it yet at the time of our recording right now about the microbiome. And that was a
Mhm.
case where people's microbiomes, if you look at sort of more evolutionarily EA-ish people, hunter horticulturists, hunter gatherers, their microbiomes look very different than like a Western
Mhm.
modern. Is what you study a case where there's less of a sort of mismatchy thing, or do you think there still might be mismatchy stuff? Like, I mean, obviously, breastfeeding, an absence of
Mhm.
breastfeeding, or like a reduced amount of maternal leave, or maybe
Right.
C-sections that are planned. I don't know, like, is that something you've thought about, or is there potential mismatchy kind of things? Or are we doing things to violate the good assumptions of these systems that we might not know and inadvertently maybe making ourselves less healthy, for example?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, mismatch is very much a part of what we're studying. In the cancer point of view, I think of mismatch of a long history. So we're looking at cancer in chimpanzees. What do they get compared to what humans get, right? So it's a broader
Mm,
mismatch in terms of that a little bit. And it's interesting. We're seeing very different patterns of cancer in our closest living relatives. So like what's going on there? And then yeah, with the pregnancy stuff, same thing. Yeah, like mismatch in terms of C-sections. We see maybe more spillover of fetal cells.
mm,
So there's some consequences. Also, yeah, breastfeeding in general, thinking about it from a mismatch point of view in terms of how much you're doing, but also thinking about breastfeeding from a maternal fetal conflict kind of view. It's interesting because we always say like, breastfeeding's the best, and the longest is best for the infant focus. What's best for the mother? How long should the mother breastfeed for her own best health and interest? And that's missing in our narrative completely.
mm,
And there could be a trade-off at some point where the breastfeeding is still great for the infant, but actually it's not good for the mom anymore because it is a biological process that has a demand on the maternal body. It's inflammatory. It's got all these other things going on. So, yeah.
yeah, cool.
Yeah, that's one of the great insights of the evolutionary perspective, which is it focuses you on trade-offs. So even if something is
Yes.
good for the infant, that
Yes.
doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good for mom. So I think that's a really important insight. Um, I'm curious. When I was looking over your research, I saw something called Pedo or Peto's paradox.
Yes.
I don't know how it's pronounced. I don't know what that is. I'd like to learn about what it is. I like a good paradox.
Yes.
Um,
Everyone's
I
very
like a good
confused by this
paradox.
paradox. The thing about paradoxes is they're very no. Yeah, it's Peto's paradox, and this is great. This is was proposed in the 70s. It was an epidemiologist, Richard Peto. He was studying cancer evolution. Cancer is such an interesting case study for, how technology really shifted the field because I think in the 70s we knew cancer evolved, right? And cancer cells evolved and there's these evolutionary principles of cancer. And then within the 80s and 90s, we're all just decided that we're going to sequence everything and try and find the cancer gene and the genetics. And
Mm.
and then we got really too detailed, right? Instead of looking at this big holistic picture and trying to fundamentally understand that each cancer is different and it's a whole bunch of different mutation signatures and it's like this emergent property. We went very molecular and now we're kind of spit out on the other end where we're back to this like, oh, we went that route and actually we got to go more holistic. But in the 70s, it was so amazing. Richard Peto observed that elephants have 100 more cells than humans. If cancer is a disease of cell division and cell mutation, shouldn't species that have more cells have more cancer? But what I'm seeing is humans have a lot more cancer than elephants. Not all elephants are dropping dead of cancer, right? So what's going on there? And the idea
wow.
is they must have evolved more cancer defense mechanisms than humans, at least, in order
Oh,
to
okay.
maintain their soma and maintain the amount of cells that they have for a really long time, too. They can live into their 60s, right?
Right.
So they have this huge body and soma. And so that was proposed. And then, okay, so how do we test this? And so we worked with actually a bunch of zoos. And that was a wild ride because just different zoos have different protocols, but they all have, like, I remember just calling zoos and being like, do you have data on cancer in your animals? And they're like, oh yeah, we could work with you, and you just got to fill out a research proposal. What species do you want to work on? And I said all of them, and they were like, no, you can't
There was like
can't do that.
silence.
Yeah, they're like, no, we don't have the infrastructure
Yeah.
to look at that. But we eventually started working with like it got easier. Um, and then we tested that. Do elephants actually get less cancer? Because this was just a really elegant theory, right? And I love this. This is why we need more theory in this kind of work. And they still get cancer. Okay. But all else being equal for the amount of cells they have, they get less than
Hmm.
what is predicted based on humans. And then colleagues of mine sequenced their genome and discovered there's a gene that we get. We have one copy of this gene, two alleles, one from our mom, one from our dad. And it's called P53, and it's tagline, the guardian of the genome.
Hmm.
Okay. So if you get a mutation, it turns on and it makes decisions. Does the cell die? Do we fix it? Do we do all these things? It's a central feature. It's highly conserved. It's an important gene. So we have two copies. It seems like elephants have 40 copies,
Well,
potentially,
Whoa.
up to that many. And so that was a really neat discovery. It's like, oh, this may be why they get less cancer. They have extras of this gene. This
hmm.
gene is also, if it's mutated in about 70% of cancers, I think, is the estimate. So if it gets knocked out, that's pretty bad. But if you're an elephant and one gets knocked out and you have backup copies, it might just be fine. So
Yeah. It's a
Hmm.
really good example of theory driven, how
I love
efficient
it.
theory
I
driven is,
love it.
because if you were just like, what's the chance that you would just, what are all the genes you could genotype
Yes.
in an elephant or any
Right.
species? So if you just did like blind brute empiricism,
Right.
the sun would
Right.
explode by the time you made this discovery. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So
Yeah.
more
Um,
funding is needed, yeah, for
Yeah,
yes.
specific
totally.
theory,
So is
evolutionary theory in
so,
medicine.
So is the paradox that we would expect more cancer in
Yes.
organisms with more cells because there are more opportunities for cancer to evolve, given that there are more cell divisions and more mutation opportunities, and the fact that we don't see that is the paradox.
Yes, correct.
Got it.
Thank you
Okay.
for vocalizing that because it gets
Yeah.
a little bit confusing because everyone's like proving Peto's paradox, and then like they're like, but wait, did we prove like
Did we?
how do we
Yeah.
prove a paradox? Like,
Yeah.
and so there's been all this like, and then there's just been a little nuance because as more data's come out, it does seem like body size does matter, and certain larger animals might have an increased risk of cancer. Like it's a very small effect, but we
Mm.
really like, we're talking about such small numbers here. And again, it's not as much as expected for an animal with the many cells they have. And so it's, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there
But
anything to this? I remember reading something, it was like a Scott Alexander blog post about how one reason why whales don't have a lot of cancer is that they're so big that their cancer gets cancer. Is that is that
That's
totally a dumb
awesome.
idea that has no
it's
merit
not
or
it's not that dumb of an idea. And as cancer cells evolve, they mutate, and
yeah,
there's lots of death and selection, and
yeah,
sometimes cancers can collapse in on of itself, right?
hmm,
And so the
yeah,
idea that's an idea that's out there. There's very little research on whale cancer,
mhm,
because they live in the ocean, and when they die, they end up at the bottom of the ocean. So we don't have a
mm,
lot of research. Our group has looked at the P53 gene in whales to see if they've expanded it too, and they haven't.
Hmm.
But we
mm.
do think they live some of these whale species live 200 years. We
Wow.
can we can guess from that lifespan that they're pretty good at not getting cancer.
Yeah,
What are the mechanisms? That's what's really exciting actually about a comparative approach is like there's not just one solution,
yeah,
right? So elephants
totally.
have the P53 solution. Whales don't. What's their solution? What if P53 is not very translatable to human, you know, cancer therapeutics? There's still like there's such vast biodiversity that we could look at beyond elephants and even beyond whales potentially, in terms of that. So yeah, but no, it's not a stupid idea to think maybe the cancer too. Like
Okay.
we just haven't been able to
Cool. It's such a fun idea. I'm
actually.
glad there's some truth to it.
No one's been able to test it or prove it. We have all
Mhm.
of, again, we're still in the theory based for that kind of stuff. But
Yeah. Still though, I
Mhm.
mean, it's an incredible sales pitch for the evolutionary perspective in that there's literally something like, a bunch of different mini cures for cancer out there in the animal kingdom that we just don't know about. And like that in itself should be the best sales pitch you could ever get for studying humans in a comparative evolutionary context.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, there's debates, and we could go on about like what's the best species to study, but we always try and stick within mammals because we hope that that might be the most translatable. But yeah, there's
Mhm.
some really neat species out there. Like, have you ever heard of the Greenland shark?
No?
Is it
No,
blind?
I think so.
Okay, that's all I know.
Okay, I want
Maybe.
to.
I don't even know if I know that.
Well, I need to learn about this because my
It's
daughter's
it's
obsessed with sharks, so I'll tell her
it's
all about it
big.
once we're.
Its lifespan is estimated to be around 400 or 500 years.
Wow.
Wow.
And then its age of maturation. Do you want to guess what the age of maturation is
100.
estimated to be?
100.
It's 150.
Wow.
Wow.
It is
That's
such a
crazy.
slow. And so going back to like life history theory, we think these very slow species are like building their cells really carefully. And so they
Mm.
have these extra, like, which means they
Right.
have these extra defenses in them, right? Like they are so slow growing. And I think that's, again, another, if we could go back to the conversation, like, why do we get cancer? It's these trade-offs where, like, do I have the opportunity to grow slowly? Nope. Well, I'm going to
Right.
grow less carefully, but I'm going to get big enough to get resources and access to mates, even though it's a little sloppy, right? And
Right.
that's where a lot of organisms end up. Greenland shark clearly doesn't have very many predators and has the
Yeah.
opportunity to really slow down and take its time in its life history strategy. And it's so cool.
Wow. Wow.
Really cool.
Um,
Hmm.
for people who are interested in this kind of approach, and I can imagine there's two audiences listening. One is students who might be interested in like learning more about this or studying evolutionary medicine. In addition to working with you at UCSB, are there other, I mean, how many other people are doing this kind of thing? And like, are the who, if there was somebody listening who was like, oh, I'm really interested in evolutionary medicine, in addition to reaching out to you, who else would you suggest? I mean, not to put you on the spot about and
No,
an
yeah.
omission doesn't mean you don't think they're doing it, but just curious, like, do you have suggestions about like who are people who are currently doing this kind of work?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have a society. It's
Ooh,
called the International Society for Evolution, Medicine, and Public Health. And there's a journal called the Evolution Medicine and Public Health Journal.
awesome.
So there's a community there, and there's tons of resources on the web page for different groups. But then within the U.S., there's these little pockets that have like hotspots of individuals that study evolutionary medicine. UCLA has an evolutionary medicine program that's a master's program that's quite great. Arizona State University has the Center for Evolution and Medicine, and it's invested and has a bunch of different individuals there. It's interesting. They're always within an or adjacent to an anthropology program and a psychology like it is this interdisciplinary mix. Also, Duke has this in the Tri-Some area has this really great opportunity because there is a med school. But also there's like zoos and the Duke Lemur Center and all that. And so but it's within the anthropology department. There's
Mm,
been a really big growth in individuals studying evolutionary medicine. And then outside of the US, there's groups in like Zurich and various other countries that are kind of becoming these hubs for evolutionary medicine
awesome. That sounds
stuff.
great. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
and then for people who are not students but are just interested in maybe like a not terrible popularization, like are there any resources for that? I mean, that's a hard question, and I don't even know what I would tell people like for what I do for like a popular source. Are there are there books you would recommend for people who are interested in?
Yeah, one of the foundational books is Randy Nesse and George Williams' Why We Get Sick.
Mm,
That's a really great first pass at evolutionary medicine. Um, and then there's within the cancer community, there's a really great book by James DeGregory called Adaptive Oncogenesis.
mm.
That's a tongue tie, but
Cool.
it's
Yeah,
a really great
yeah,
book. Athena Actipis has written a book called The Cheating Cell,
right.
which also is has an evolutionary perspective. Those two are specifically on cancer biology.
Yeah.
But I think within every subfield of evolutionary medicine, there's probably some more popular stuff that I'm probably forgetting about, but we'll
Yeah.
remember as soon
No,
as we
that's awesome. Yeah, no,
I'll
no, no, no.
remember
No,
it
I know.
tonight
Yeah,
while
yeah, no,
I'm like
exactly.
laying
No,
down. I'll be like,
it's great.
oh, I forgot this. And oh
We can always
no.
add it to show
Yeah.
notes if we think of something. Do you talk to enough psychologists, or are we doing as psychologists a bad job of talking to evolutionary medicine people? Like the body's hooked up to the,
Right.
yeah, do we
Yeah,
do
the mind
you,
and body are all it's the same thing, you know.
yeah, yeah,
Right. I was just thinking that because it is these fields that are quite distinct, but have
yeah,
very similar starting points.
yeah,
And like
Yeah.
within the evolutionary medicine field, there clearly are evolutionary psychiatrist because that's who Randy Nesse is.
right,
And
right.
and here's another book. He wrote a book called Good Reasons for Bad Feelings or
Mm,
something along
That's
those
right.
yeah,
lines. And I like that title. But again, talking about how depression can be an adaptation and anxiety can be an adaptation and all of these things, right?
Yeah.
Um, But it is interesting that these fields haven't necessarily um, merged as much as you would
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah.
But I think there is this historical context of like
Yeah.
neck up,
Yeah, totally.
you
Yes,
Yeah, no,
know,
totally.
no, no.
like, oh,
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're
reason
working
versus
in the,
passion. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're working in
Yeah.
the that area, and I'm going to stay away from
Yeah.
humans and how they make decisions.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yes,
But
Totally.
you would, I
Yeah,
mean,
no.
from a first
Yeah.
principles evolutionary perspective, you would very much expect that the mind and the decision making and the control system is very much dependent on like what's the state of the thing I'm in, right? Like so
right.
this thing
Yeah.
of like I know there's like work like Josh Snodgrass, we should have him on
Yes,
or with the
yes,
lassitude, right? But there
yes,
should be all kinds of psychological contingencies with what's the state of the body, right? And back and forth, you would expect that on first principles, right?
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And and honestly, I see like ways where like, okay, so evolutionary medicine has maybe provided these kind of drastic ways we treat people. It could be different, right? And then we don't see uptake in it, right? Like, for
Mm,
example, like when I talk about the cancer therapy of maybe control versus cure, we clearly need people to understand why people make the decisions they make and why they avoid the decisions they make
yeah.
and what and and are there ways you could, tap into that better so they could
Mm.
understand and be able to?
Oh, interesting. So
Yeah.
you're even talking about like the psychology of like the intervention and how people, the
Yes.
metaphors people use to think. That's a really cool
Yes.
idea. That's
Yes.
something, yeah, like how do people think about medicine or the body?
Yes.
Yeah, that's really
Yes.
cool. I don't know if there any psychology on that. Like
Not,
folk physiology, more or less.
Yes.
I mean, aside from maybe
yeah.
like how do the dumb wrong natives think about
Right.
science? Like that's I'm
I
aware of
mean,
work on that. Like,
yeah.
but like
Right.
There's a
and
bit of stuff on
those
like,
scare quotes for people who couldn't see,
yeah.
right? I'm saying like
Yes.
it was very like poo-pooing like, e-
Yes.
ethnographic
Yeah.
knowledge that was probably very valuable. But yeah, I don't know. Is there work on sort of like the intuitive psychology of medicine or physiology or like in the same way there's like a theory of mind, is there
Yeah.
like a theory of
Yeah.
body, right?
Theory of medicine.
Mm.
Like there might
Yeah.
be very well be folk medicine,
Yeah.
you know.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
there is folk medicine, but I'm ignorant enough to that to not know if it
Yeah.
kind of talks about this
I mean, there's a
broader.
bit of stuff. I
Yes.
mean, about like,
Yes.
medicinal practices and hunter-gatherer
Yes.
societies and how
Yes.
they often have pretty impressive, herbal knowledge and remedies and that's
Yes.
intertwined with like, the study of shamanism and stuff like that. Um,
Yes.
And it's still there's still some debate about like how much of that is actually effective and how much of it is just kind of a ritual or superstition. And I'm agnostic about that question, but it seems like a hugely understudied and important topic given how much medicine is interfacing with our lives and with the modern world. Just getting a handle on how we think about it and how our representations of medicine, interact with our own ability to cope with illness.
Right. But I do see that there is a divide where people study that as in terms of like folk medicine or, like traditional medicine, but we're not thinking about it in terms of like industrialized population in our medicine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where there's not really that crossover.
Yeah,
And it's
it's still
clearly
folk, it's all folk
important.
medicine. It's all folk medicine.
Yeah, it's still, I
It
mean,
is.
basically,
Yeah.
It
doctor,
is. It
a
Yeah.
large
really
part of the
is.
doctor's job is to be a shaman in a white
Yeah.
lab coat,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I mean, even from like, like if you're a researcher in a lab, you do so many rituals before you run your experiment to do a
yeah,
discovery. Like you,
yeah,
you are just like, there is still so much of that psychology that
absolutely.
we can't like, I can't mess this up. It worked yesterday, so I have to wear the same outfit. I have to do this. I have to
Yeah.
do that. Like there's still so much of that within labs.
Yeah.
They have
Totally.
like special, like, I don't know, this is my good luck pipette, like all of this
Yeah.
stuff to get
Yeah.
to get things to work that I
Yeah.
don't think we've moved that far away from it. We just
Yeah.
call it something different.
Yeah. It makes sense.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
As
Yeah, we're just
Rob
talking.
Boyd once said, and it always stuck with me, the world is opaque, right? Like the world is
Yes.
opaque, so you have to, it's everything is a mystery. Yeah.
Totally.
Yes.
Yeah, we were just talking to Clark Barrett about that. The episode we just released yesterday about how about ritual practices and like pre-hunting dances that the Shuar engage in.
Or songs,
And
yeah,
yeah, and he
yeah,
made the
yeah.
interesting point that like a lot of our statistical practices are, have the same kind of logic where we don't really know how they work. We're just
Mm.
accepting them because the ancestors have bequeathed them to us, and
Yes.
it's not all that different from a ritual like a hunting dance or a ritual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, which I think maybe, yeah, coming back to thinking about applying that in terms of getting evolutionary medicine or any evolutionary perspectives into something is it's not already in that ritual
Yes,
that people are
exactly. Yes,
doing, right?
yes.
Like it's just like, no, we don't do it that way. We have to do it this way. And
Yeah.
I think it's really unfortunate because it's probably how we structure medical schools. It's how we structure schools in general, like in terms of silos. Like I want students at UCSB to not have to just take a major classes. I want them to be able to take classes from all over campus, and that's just not possible. And I feel like you ask why, and people are like, well, because we have departments. and
Yeah.
and then you're like, but why?
Why do we have departments?
Why
Yeah.
do we have departments? And they're like,
Yeah.
well, because and it's all of this stuff. And it's like, but we could have bigger, better learners if we could have crosstalk across so many different disciplines. But
Yeah. And I feel like it always lands on it's either because it's difficult and we've always done it this way, and those two things are in a loop,
yes.
right? Sort of
Yes.
doing it any other way is more difficult because we've always done it this way, and we've always done it this way, and that's, it's not a good reason to do things, but yeah, it is hard to change things. Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you, we're getting closer to the end here. How did you talked about sort of the way biology is taught in school, and David and I have talked a little bit about how, at least for me, I don't want to speak for David, like I was like learning parts of the grasshopper in like high school bio. I had a
Yeah.
great high school in many ways, but the bio, sorry, like at least at the time I was taking it was horrible. It was just laundry list. It was stamp collecting. There were no
Hmm.
principles. Were you interested in biology? How did you get interested in like Amy Boddy as a kid?
Yes.
Like, how did you get here? Like, how do
Right.
you
Right.
is there a story? Yeah.
Oh, it's the most boring story. No, I was not necessarily interested in the natural world. I mean, as much as any kid, like I
Yeah,
was,
sure.
in
Yeah.
the 80s, you're outside all day long observing things and doing all that. And I always liked maybe like math and lean towards more like quantitative type of analyses and stuff like that. But it wasn't until a community college class that I took, and it was a biology class, and the professor was amazing, and he
Mm.
was so excited about biology. And I was like, oh wow, this is great, right? And this is really cool. And the same thing with evolution. I had no evolution in my high school training at all. Like, I don't think we learned about it at right now. I have a 14-year-old daughter. She is learning about
Mm.
natural selection. And I'm always like, wait, you're learning that? I'm teaching my undergrad.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
But there is a disconnect, and you have to reteach these principles because you don't know if everyone is getting the same education. And so I always start from the beginning when I'm teaching these classes. But yeah, I didn't really start studying biology until I was in community college. And it was the same thing. We were doing labs and dissecting mice and various things. And I really liked it. And I really liked evolution too. Those types of classes. It really opened my mind up. So
Yeah. David, you were
All
gonna
right.
say something.
No, I mean, I think we're about getting to that part of the episode where we ask our question about questions,
Yeah, should we
which
have
is,
asked you anything? Yes.
oh, that's such a tricky question.
I know we often if it is a spring we spring it on you and then we give you a few seconds we banter about something else to yeah to give you a second to think about if there's anything else that we should have asked you about. Yeah. And it's a hard question.
I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I can't think of
That's
anything.
fine. Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
totally okay.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah,
we,
I don't. I can't think of a single guest who like totally, except for I don't know,
Should we
maybe like
stop
Josh
ask?
Tiber was like because he's a fan. He knew we were
Oh
gonna
yeah,
ask him, and he like
Josh.
came with like a
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
answer.
oh,
Um, but like
yes,
Maybe we
he
should
was,
most
maybe we
guests
should
are
stop
he
asking.
prepared.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe we
No, I
should
think
stop.
it's a good one because some people could be like, oh, wait, we didn't talk
I
about
had
this
this
area
whole
of my
other thing I
research.
wanted to talk
Or
about, like,
like,
because people are
oh,
psychic.
I
Because
promoted a book or
yeah, no,
something. Yeah,
exactly.
no,
Yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah. No, grift. This is your chance to no, grift.
No, this was great. I
Oh,
love
goodness.
that we were able to talk about both worlds and of my research and connect them. And yeah,
Yeah, it's really
super
great.
fun.
And I mean, one of the things I'm like, people are, who listen are probably bored by this, but like you and Amy, you and I are colleagues, but I never get a
Yes,
chance to talk about science. This is one of the reasons for doing this is just it's a
yes,
great chance to like talk about science. Um,
absolutely.
yeah. Well, thank you for doing what you're doing. You're literally like helping us understand how like cancer works, and you're still, you might, for all we know, a year or two from now, you might discover something in Wales that
Yeah.
revolutionizes, what was it, the P35?
P53.
P53.
Yes,
Okay, close,
yes,
close enough.
Yeah.
yes. So
Um,
close.
No.
yeah, no, it's just incredible. And I hope that you have lots and lots of students knocking on your doors and lots of funders. And it sounds like the funding agencies really need to get their act together too.
I mean, welcome to the new state of
Yeah, yeah.
America funding situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it sounds like even
Um,
before, like the binning and the silos and the like kind of presuming the
mhm,
categories of solutions ahead of time
I
made it
know.
so that this was sort of an odd man out or not in the Venn diagram, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of funding agencies are like, we want something risky, and then they're like, not that risky. Like, it's like their idea of risky and my
Wow.
idea of risky are
Wow.
not in the
Yeah.
same category, and
Yeah.
so that's unfortunate. But there's foundations that fund some of this stuff, and yeah, I
Yeah.
don't
So
know.
if you have a lot, if you're listening, you have a lot of money that you would love to have a high risk, high possible like cancer solution, contact Amy Boddy, right?
Yes,
That's
there you
the,
go.
yeah.
Absolutely.
We don't do ads, but that's an ad we can do.
Yes.
Yeah. Is there any, like, seriously, is there any other things like where people, if they want to, like, are there certain projects that you think, like, if people are interested in supporting them, like, are there other ones, or is that the general thing that it's, yeah.
Um, yeah, there's tons of like, yeah, there's, I mean, the whole world of, I mean, we talk a lot about evolutionary medicine, but the whole world of comparative biology is just understudied in so many different ways. And then we only study the species that matter for who they matter for in the population. So like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
just,
Cool. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Lots of incredible things. So, well, thanks for being on. It was a pleasure. It was really good talking, and I like that we're as an evolutionary psychology podcast, we're also talking to people who are doing who are adaptationists, who are doing evolutionary approach, but studying or and studying no but and studying the rest of the body or the this issue of the psychology and the physiology. We need to start talking more.
Yeah, absolutely. This was so fun.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me on.
it was
Yes.
wonderful. Thanks so much.
Our pleasure.
Yep.
Thanks so much.
I learned a lot in this episode, and I think people who have been listening to the podcast know they can, subscribe and like, leave positive comments. We have a Patreon page. Am I leaving anything out?
I think those are the big ones. Yeah, just support us in whatever way you can. Help us push the evolutionary framework wider and farther through the world.
We've also gotten some emails from people and some suggestions for guests, and that's always appreciated, as well. So, yeah, and suggestions for topics. And nobody's gotten David a fanny pack yet.
I am starting to get a little peeved, to be honest, Dave. I've been waiting on that fanny pack for months now, and it has not arrived.
Yeah.
I'm starting to think that, our listeners don't really have a lot of respect for me.
Okay. That's them's fighting words. And you said green or black?
Either
Have you
one.
come around to, have you decided?
Ideally green and black,
Ah,
striped.
okay. All right. Well, that's one way to do it. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and French fries. That's the other thing. If you bring
With
us
the
French
French
fries,
fries
we'll
inside the
have you
fanny
on, I
pack. You
guess.
you know what I like, listeners. You know your way to my heart.
It's so ridiculous. Okay. Well, have a good week. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.